Greetings. It's Monday, the 21st of July, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. I hope everyone had a nice moon day. That's what I call July the 20th. It was 56 years ago, yesterday on Sunday, that Armstrong and Aldrin became the first men to walk on the moon, while Michael Collins orbited above. If history and our leaders were more kind and intelligent, we would have kept going on and exploring space and made July 20 a national holiday. But we didn't. Relatively few people remember, and a sickeningly growing number of people don't believe it ever happened. I've made a hobby over the years of countering any and all so-called proof the moon landings were fake. But I've learned over time that you can't argue reason to religious fanatics, which is what they are. Trying to prove them wrong is as futile as administering medicine to a corpse, to borrow from a line by Thomas Paine. It's just another sign of a sick, uneducated, growingly stupid society with far too many idiots in charge and in positions of influence. Thank you, Internet. But for those of us who remember when we began to travel to other worlds, we can still close our eyes, take a deep breath, and go back to those times when the dreams of our people became real, and the future was oh so bright. Now, back to the reality of the sick and the idiots. The Epstein case. Oh, my. What a mess that is turning into. And not just for President Trump, but for the nation as a whole. I'm not going to go into or dwell on this too much, simply because so many other people are doing it, it's almost 24/7 coverage. I'm not going to add to all the speculation and all the outright lies, guessing, and another hazard clickbait, claiming first-hand knowledge of whatever. There is far too much of that, and just about all of it is a waste of time and not worthy of one's attention. But clearly, with this much smoke, there is one hell of a fire burning someplace, if not more than a few. The problem is there are so many of the rich and powerful caught up in this thing that finding someone or some group who can head up an independent investigation aimed at digging up the truth would be one hell of a challenge at this point. Too many members of the U.S. Congress seem to be tied to this thing, if not directly, then by way of the billionaires who fund them. And they're the ones that seem to be really scared of what's going on. President Trump's behavior and actions, especially the lawsuit filed against the Wall Street Journal, well, it's quite telling. And it's a sign of something, not just being rotten in Denmark, but rotten in a few other places. The FBI doesn't seem interested in a serious investigation either, which is what led to a lot of this brouhaha. So who do we call on to get to the bottom of all this? Who do we hire to find the bad guys and get them prosecuted and appropriately punished for what apparently was a many years long, horrible abuse of children? That's the question that needs to be asked and answered. Not who did what, because just guessing is not proof. Just guessing is not something that you can take to court. Whose job is it going to be to lift up the rock and expose the worms and other slithery creatures to the light of day and kill them off? And speaking of worms, former President Obama and Hillary Clinton seem to be in a lot of trouble. The infamous Russian hoax. Yes, that thing. It's well, there's a long story of that there, and we all know about it. But Tulsi Gabbard seems to have been working on this one for a long time, and boy, is she shaking the tree. It could also explain why she's been putting up with so much abuse in recent weeks from so many different people, including the president. Tulsi is calling for the prosecution of a former president of the United States and his former Secretary of State, seemingly for treason. The Madam Director of National Intelligence has said more facts and evidence will be forthcoming this week. If a grand jury is called and indictments handed down, it will be the most significant and dramatic bit of judicial theater in American history. And sadly, one more destabilizing event for our already shaky republic. Now, over to the Middle East. It's more of the same. People are still being killed in Gaza. The war with Iran is still smoldering with no new fighting, and also no sign that the Iranian government is going to be overthrown. But do expect things to change at some point and to see this Cold War heat up a little bit. And I predict it'll happen very quickly and with very little warning. That's usually how these things go. One can go back to 1939-1940 with what was called the Phony War between Great Britain and Germany. Nothing was happening until something was. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia continues, and Senator Lindsey Graham also continues. Seems like all these conflicts are on some sort of summer break, doesn't it? Well, summer breaks never last forever, either for politicians or for school children, although the latter seems to have a tendency to make the most out of their time and are innocent as well. On a more lighthearted, or should I say dark-hearted bit of news, is the mysterious death of a famous paranormal investigator in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And this occurred while he was touring the United States with an old Raggedy Ann doll supposedly possessed by a demonic spirit. Yeah, that's certainly out of the ordinary. And it is a welcome distraction from the other horror stories currently playing out in our nation's capital. Dan Rivera, a man who's been known for many years as a leading expert in paranormal phenomena, ghosts, spirits, demons, and the like. Well, he was found dead in his hotel room in Gettysburg a little more than a week ago. His passing is currently under investigation, but it doesn't seem to be the result of foul play. At least, not of the terrestrial kind. Mr. Rivera was touring the country with an old Raggedy Ann doll that was supposedly possessed by a benevolent spirit of a young girl named Annabelle. The story of this item goes back to 1968, and if there was ever a time in American history where demonic forces were at work, it was that year. So you never know, do you? I'll let you do the research on the history of Annabelle if you want to get into that sort of thing. Anyway, the man died for some reason. We'll know in a few weeks when the autopsy results are in. But to make the story much more interesting, we're finding out that the doll Annabelle is missing. It wasn't in his hotel room, we are being told. Was it stolen? If so, by whom? Or did it escape? Now, for those of you not familiar with this little bit of American culture, the Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls, they are rather rustic cloth toys for children that have been a part of American culture for more than 100 years. and you can find them just about everywhere. They were a merchandising gimmick for a storybook that came out, I believe, in 1918, and they've been around ever since. They're cheap. They're about $20 online in some places. You can find them just about anywhere. They're probably, of course, made in China these days and not as well constructed as they used to be, but I digress. I think this story is going to get really, really weird. And perhaps a little fun, although not for the late Mr. Rivera and his family, of course. Gettysburg is the site of the bloodiest military engagement in the history of the Western Hemisphere. More than 50,000 men were killed over 3 days in 1863. Lots of ghosts there, real ones, I'm told. So the opportunity to play all sorts of interesting tricks on people is going to be far too tempting for some. Anyone can pick up a similar doll and leave it at an intersection in the middle of the night for an hour or so and then take it away. Boy, is that going to get some tongues wagging. Or hold it up to someone's window for a few seconds and then run away when they hear screams. Imagine the fun to be had and the mayhem that can be caused with an old Raggedy Ann doll just about every American family possesses at one time or another. And let's face it, that would do wonders for the tourist trade, which is what Gettysburg pretty much survives on. Yes, this is a story I'll follow for fun. I'll report back to you if anything new develops. The one good thing about demons, though, is that they're honest about their true nature and don't hide it from us. Unlike so many others you find lurking inside the Washington, D.C. Beltway these days, demons don't pretend to be honest. But many of the people who are at the head of our affairs do. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, unless they are a doll named Annabelle. You don't want to mess with that, just to be sure. Please consider a paid subscription or a donation. It keeps the lights on literally and figuratively, and with Annabelle running around, you'd want to keep the lights on. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World, the Deep State, and all demonic forces, whether they are in Washington, D.C. or elsewhere, must be destroyed. Good day,